Remember a few years ago when I flew out to Las Vegas for the launch of the new Phonak Infinio Sphere hearing aids? Well, it turns out that those hearing aids became some of the most amazing hearing aids ever when it came to background noise reduction. It's 2 years later and I still have patients that say, wow, every single time that we switch on this artificial intelligence to separate speech from noise. But to say that the Infinio Sphere hearing aid wasn't perfect would be an understatement. The size of it was huge. The battery life, not very good. It had no Auracast capabilities. They even had some pretty significant build quality issues with how the receivers attached to the hearing aids. And all of these things Phonak tried to scramble and fix. In fact, it got so bad to the point where Phonak had to release different updates to fix a lot of these issues, and they finally got it under control. But despite all of those flaws, people still raved about those hearing aids for one main reason. They pretty much solved the problem of being able to hear and understand speech in really noisy environments. So the question is, has Phonak managed to keep everything that made the Infinio Sphere hearing aid so impressive while fixing all of the issues that we saw with that hearing aid? Well, that is exactly the question I'm going to be answering in this detailed review of the new Phonak EON Sphere hearing aid now that I've had a chance to test them. And I think you're gonna like what I found. Hey guys, Cliff Olson, Doctor of Audiology and founder of Applied Hearing Solutions in Phoenix, Arizona, and let's get this video review kicked off with some of the basic things that you need to know about the Phonak EON hearing aid. First and foremost, this hearing aid comes in a sphere version and a non-sphere version. There is no longer an ultra designation with these particular hearing aids. That was with last generation in the Infinio devices. Now, the biggest difference between the sphere version and the non-sphere version is that the sphere version now uses the new Hypersonic AI chip. The non-sphere version does not have that Hypersonic chip, but it is compatible with the new CROS transmitter that the sphere version of this hearing aid is not compatible with. Now, the sphere version and the non-sphere version are the exact same size. All right, let's talk about the elephant in the room, and by elephant, I mean the size of those old sphere hearing aids. They were huge, to say the least. Well, I'm happy to report that the new sphere version of this EON hearing aid is back down to a reasonable size. In fact, they reduced the size by 25%. I have to say that the size of the original Infinio Sphere hearing aids was the #1 reason why people would not take a recommendation for that device. Of course, everything else about what you see here is basically exactly the same push buttons, the same light indicator, the same battery contacts, and the same receiver wires. You want to see what they look like while I'm wearing them? Okay, I will oblige. So let me go ahead and put in the left one here. Let's get the right one in. I've always enjoyed how the Phonak hearing aids actually fit my ears, not just on my ears, but in my ears as well, with how the receiver wires are contoured. Let me get these new Sedona red colored hearing aids on my ears. Hopefully you guys can see that. They are definitely slimmer, so I'm not noticing them pushing out my ears like I had with the previous generation Sphere version of these devices. Now, you may not be into this Sedona red color, but it's kind of like more of a muted color. I think it looks really good. It will be perfect for people who have red hair. Of course, Phonak still offers all of their standard colors if you're not into the Sedona red. All right, let's go ahead and talk about technology levels of these hearing aids. For the Sphere version, you now have 3 technology levels. You have the top tier 90, the second tier 70, and the bottom tier 50. Previously, the Spheres were only in the top 2 technology levels, so now, of course, they've added this third one. The caveat here is that you have to manually activate the artificial intelligence with a separate program inside of the level 50 devices, whereas it will function automatically with level 90 and level 70. The non-Sphere version of this hearing aid come in all 4 of the typical Phonak technology levels. You have 90, 70, 50, and 30. Now, I feel like a broken record at this point, but you just have to know when it comes to technology level that each time you drop down in technology level, it takes features and customizations away from your hearing care professional when they're trying to optimize the performance of those devices for you. It does not guarantee that you will lose performance if you drop from a level 90 to a level 70 or a level 50 to a level 30. It just means that there's potential that you'd be leaving benefit on the table, not just now, but into the future as well. I should also note that it is impossible to try and determine which technology level would be best for you based on your hearing loss configuration or your lifestyle. lifestyle. This is why I recommend the same thing to all of my patients, which is you should be going with the highest level of technology you can reasonably afford, and if you cannot afford it, you drop down to whatever level you can afford, and it's the job of your hearing care professional to maximize the performance of those devices for you. The caveat here is that how well you perform with the EON and EON Sphere hearing aids completely depends on your hearing care professional and if they follow comprehensive audiologic best practices when fitting and programming these hearing aids for you. If your hearing care professional is one of the 95% of professionals that does not follow comprehensive best practices like real ear measurements, then you will not hear your absolute best with these hearing aids. This is one of the reasons why I started HearingUp, which is my network of hearing care professionals who are committed to following comprehensive best practices with every patient that they treat. So if you want to hear your absolute best with your Phonak EON or EON Sphere hearing aids, finding a provider on HearingUp.com is your best bet. Okay, I'll go into my typical spiel here about the cost of these hearing aids. So the cost will be dependent on a variety of different factors, including what technology level you go with, where you live, what services are included with your purchase, and the quality of those services. If you live in a low cost of living area, you go with the EON 30s, you don't get a whole lot of services with those hearing aids, or those services are not very high quality, you'll probably get away with spending only a couple $1,000s. If you live in a high cost of living area, you want the premium EON 90 Sphere devices with a lot of great services from a hearing clinic, then you could be spending upwards of $10,000 for a pair. Just remember that the majority of the price that you pay for hearing aids is due to the services that you receive with those hearing aids. So if you spend a lot of money on new hearing aids like these, then you should expect to get high quality services and have a high level of performance. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the range of hearing losses that these hearing aids are intended for. So if you have anything from a mild level hearing loss up to a profound level hearing loss, you can use these hearing aids. They have the ability to use standard, medium, power, and ultra power receiver wires, and they also are compatible with the Activent receivers. The good news is, in addition to reducing the size of these hearing aids, Phonak also fixed the second major flaw. In fact, this is probably the biggest flaw that they had with the previous generation, and that was the attachment of the receiver wires to the body of this hearing aid. It was discovered that if you inserted the receiver wires into these hearing aids on the wrong angle, it would actually damage the hearing aid. That hearing aid would then have to be sent back to Phonak to fix that damage, and so they did resolve it, but that is not an issue with these hearing aids. They have essentially fixed the design mistake, and now those receiver wires are easily attached to the hearing aids without breaking the hearing aid. Now, I don't know why I'm putting this hearing aid back into my ear, because I want to show you something here. So you can use these, of course, with a rubber dome. That is a vented rubber dome that you're looking at right there. Or you can use a custom ear mold. Now, I'm a bigger fan of the seashell ear molds instead of the slim tip ear molds. The seashell ear molds actually encase the receiver or the speaker inside of the mold like you see here, and allows the tip of that receiver to come all the way to the tip of the mold rather than it being recessed if you're using a slim tip. The only negative is that if you damage this, the whole thing has to go into the manufacturer. If you damage a receiver wire on a slim tip, then you can just exchange the wire. But if you're looking for optimal performance, using a custom seashell on these hearing aids will get you that performance. So let me go back to the Easy Guard domes here for a second. I mean, these things are amazing. I wish I could use these on every other hearing aid that I dispense in my clinic. Essentially, I have a review video on this, so if you want to check that out, that's fine. But there is a sound permeable membrane on the tip of this that does not allow wax to get into the wax trap. So you essentially, if you use domes on these and you use the Easy Guard domes, you never have to change a wax trap ever again. Now, a little bit later in this review, I will talk about the performance differences between a custom ear mold and one of these rubber domes, and it's a big difference, so you want to make sure you check that part of the video out. All right, but let's move on to durability. So these hearing aids have an IP68 rating. That is nothing new, but these hearing aids are incredibly resistant to debris and moisture. One thing that you probably noticed me mentioning in my detailed review videos is that I always like to take these hearing aids out for a few hour-long trail run in the hot Arizona desert to see if I can kill them with sweat. And for good measure, I also simulate getting caught in a rainstorm, which is basically Ashley hosing me down. So far, I have not been able to kill these hearing aids with moisture. All right, let's talk about rechargeability. The EONs come only in a rechargeable form factor. That's the EONs and the EON Spheres. You cannot get these with the disposable battery. In fact, it's been that way for a while, but they have actually worked a lot on the efficiency of the battery usage with these hearing aids. And that's great because that was another major flaw that I mentioned earlier of the previous generation of these devices. Now, some of the battery life issues that we saw with the Infinio Spheres was resolved with the ultra firmware update that they did about a year and a half into the existence of those hearing aids, but they essentially took everything that they developed to improve upon those old hearing aids and put them into these right away. And then they improved upon it even more. The new EON Spheres can get up to 38 hours of battery life on a single charge, but if you're going to use them and stream with them and switch into the artificial intelligence, you're probably getting more realistically around 22 to 24 hours of battery life. And this is exactly what I found with my testing because I like to stream a lot and I like to use a lot of artificial intelligence. That being said, if you happen to want to stay in the Spheric AI program from the time you pull them out of the charger until the time that they die, you'll get about 11 to 12 hours of battery life, which for some people might be plenty of time for you to wear these hearing aids entirely with the artificial intelligence program activated. This is nearly double the amount of time that you can spend in this Spheric AI program compared to the first launch of this technology 2 years ago. Now, I don't know for sure, but I would not be surprised if Phonak decides to do another future firmware update to optimize the efficiency even more. Even the EON CROS transmitter is getting up to 20 hours of battery life, and I think that our first generation of this was like 11 hours. Like, people could not use the CROS transmitters because the battery life was so short, but with all of the efficiencies that Phonak has improved upon with the battery life, you can now use that CROS transmitter all day with no issues. Now, the charger itself is relatively unchanged. You can tell that they actually changed the color of it. It's definitely a darker color now, but everything else about it is the same. That internal well is the same, so same limitations when it comes to custom ear molds if you use custom ear molds. I did receive some confirmation that they're actually working on a larger charger, which I greatly appreciate. It's only taken them, 4 years since I initially mentioned it to start working and hopefully coming out with a new charger here really soon. There are 2 versions of this charger as we see them right now. This is one that does not have an internal power bank, but of course they also have one that does have an internal power bank. And yes, the EONs and the EON Sphere hearing aids both can fit inside the same charger now. All right, I'm not gonna spend a whole lot of time on tinnitus with these hearing aids. Technically, they do have maskers that you can activate, but there's not a whole lot of options when it comes to that. Fortunately, 70% of individuals with tinnitus who have an underlying hearing loss that is treated properly with a hearing aid get a reduction in that tinnitus perception. All right, let's talk about something more exciting now, which is the new Hypersonic chip inside of these hearing aids that replaces the Deep Sonic chip. Like I mentioned earlier, this new AI sound processing chip is only available inside of the Sphere version of this hearing aid. Really, the only job of this Hypersonic chip is to take the training that it received from Phonak's deep neural network and separate speech from noise as much as humanly possible by dropping the noise and increasing the speech. When researchers measure this separation, they typically do it in signal-to-noise ratio, or SNR, and it's measured in decibels. The larger this number is in decibels, the more separation of speech you're going to get over the background noise. The overall SNR improvement of this new Hypersonic chip is exactly the same as the previous generation Deep Sonic chip, which is 10.2 decibels of signal-to-noise ratio improvement. Now, this is kind of a bummer. I was hoping that we'd get at least another couple of decibels of signal-to-noise ratio improvement with these new hearing aids. But at least I can still share this same audio sample for you to help you understand how impactful this technology is. Just remember, this test was completed with the top-tier 90-level hearing aid with a fully occluding ear mold.
Intro song, and I was like so behind the beat because when I would press it down, all of a sudden the pitch shift stuff was behind by like 10 milliseconds. I mean, it's enough to make the feel off.
Now, please keep in mind, if you're using the Phonak EON Sphere hearing aid with an open rubber dome, you are not going to perceive that same level of noise reduction. I should also mention that if you drop down from level 90 to level 70 or to level 50, they actually reduce the amount of signal-to-noise ratio benefit when you drop down in those levels, which means that you'll get less reduction of the background noise and less separation of the speech above that background noise. However, while this SNR performance was basically the same, claim they did improve the efficiency of this chip by 37%. And before you start thinking to yourself, big deal efficiency, that is how they got the battery efficiency to be so much better and how they got the size of the hearing aid to be much smaller. 25% of this additional efficiency was due to the new chip design, and 16% was due to the retraining of their deep neural network. Now, there are two ways that you can unlock this additional artificial intelligence performance of the Hypersonic chip if you have the Sphere hearing aids. First, you can let the automatic program take care of this on its own for you, and as long as the noise levels reach a certain amount, this Hypersonic chip will kick into action. Now, the program that I'm referencing here is called Spheric Speech and Loud Noise, but you won't see Spheric Speech and Loud Noise switch inside of the app when you look at the home screen of the app. It will still say automatic. Now, previously, the threshold to activate Spheric Speech and Loud Noise was 69 decibels. Now, they have actually backed this off to where it only needs to reach 66 decibels of noise in your environment before this program activates. Now, that's on the default setting. Your provider can actually activate it at a lower level too. But the point is, this particular feature will activate sooner automatically, which is a benefit to a lot of individuals now that we don't really have to worry so much about battery drainage. The second way to activate this artificial intelligence program is to manually do it. Now, like I said earlier, if you have the lower technology level of the Sphere, so level 50, you have to manually activate it. It will not activate automatically. But you can also have a manual activation if you're in level 90 or level 70, but your hearing care professional has to create that program for you. Overall, I just love that we can use this artificial intelligence a heck of a lot more in a variety of different situations. Even outside of background noise situations, it does better for a lot of people. All right, so I've made you wait long enough. Let's talk about what Phonak is doing with wireless connectivity. Well, I am happy to say that Phonak is finally making Auracast available inside of the EON and EON Sphere hearing aids upon initial release. We're not just getting a promise of future Auracast capabilities. That, by the way, has still not been fulfilled in the Infinio technology. With that said, I would like to personally apologize to you guys because I've been telling you for the past 2 years that Auracast is coming inside of these Phonak hearing aids, and I had no idea that Auracast would be available in a newer technology that is released and still not have it in the one that we were promised it with. I will be much more skeptical about promises in the future, I can promise you that. And yes, they are still working on issues that they're running into with a firmware update to give you Auracast capabilities with the previous generation Infinio devices. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, Cliff, I have no idea what the heck you're talking about. What's this Auracast thing? Well, Auracast is basically a form of broadcast audio that will allow you to go into a public venue and stream the audio of that venue directly into your hearing aids. I'm talking places like churches, museums, movie theaters, or sports bars. If they install an Auracast transmitter, you'll be able to tap into that Auracast broadcast with your Phonak EON hearing aids. This is exactly why myself and my staff are going out to a bunch of different public venues in the greater Phoenix area and encouraging them to install Auracast transmitters. Eventually, Auracast will end up replacing the need for telecoils inside of hearing aids, and I'm telling you, it can't come soon enough because the EONs do not have a telecoil inside of them. I will also say that several consumer electronic devices like TVs and computers are starting to be released with Auracast capabilities, so you can tap directly into them as well. And if your electronic devices do not have Auracast yet, there are several aftermarket devices that you can purchase on Amazon that I've reviewed already on this channel that will give you access to an Auracast signal. However, there is a pretty big limitation if you have an iPhone. The MyPhonak app will allow you to tap into an Auracast broadcast signal, but only if you can scan a QR code for that signal. You can not just pull up a list of available Auracast broadcasts like you can with other hearing aids, which means that if the venue does not have a QR code that you can scan, you will not be able to access their broadcast. However, if you have certain Samsung phones like my Galaxy S25, you can access a list of available broadcasts through the Bluetooth settings on the phone, even without a QR code, despite not being able to do this in the app. Of course, you still get hands-free phone calls by double tapping your ear to answer and double tapping to hang up, and your voice is picked up by the microphones to be sent off to the person on the other end of the line. These are still technically made for any phone hearing aid, so whether you have an Android phone or an Apple phone, you can stream from both of them. But I have to warn you, The quality of the stream from an Android device, in my opinion, is substantially better than with an iPhone. The range is better, the stability is better, pretty much everything about it is better. Until Apple comes out with LE Audio Bluetooth inside of their phones, I can see Samsung and other Android devices being a better option for a lot of these hearing aids right now. Now, your streaming audio can still be customized by your hearing care professional inside of the professional programming software. I'll talk about that here a little bit more with the new AutoSense OS Ai 8.0. Now, the MyPhonak app has been updated to give you access to Auracast. Otherwise, the MyPhonak app is relatively unchanged. You can still do all the same stuff like changing programs, customizing your own programs, changing volume levels, muting your hearing aids, and doing a remote care session with your hearing care professional. I still feel like the range and stability of the Bluetooth connection with your wireless devices using a Phonak EON hearing aid is among the best in the industry. Okay, now I already told you about this, but let's talk about the new AutoSense OS Ai 8.0. Now, you may have noticed here that AI was never a part of AutoSense OS, and Phonak snuck it in here, so let me explain what I'm talking about. AutoSense is essentially the operating system that Phonak uses in order to classify the environments that you're in and switch your hearing aids into a program setting that is ideal for that environment. They are now using artificial intelligence to do that classification. Now, if you're streaming audio from your phone into your EON hearing aids, it will also classify whether or not you're streaming speech media or music media, and you can have completely different settings for both. Now, the quantity of automatic programs that you get inside of your hearing aids depends on the technology level that you go with. If you're in the top tier level 90 tech, then you're gonna have 6 different AutoSense OS programs. You'll have calm situation, speech and noise, Spheric Speech and Loud Noise, which is your AI program, speech in car, comfort and noise, and a music program. Now, when you drop down in tiers and you get down to, say, the EON 30s, you're only gonna have 2 programs inside of AutoSense. You're gonna have calm situation and speech and noise. That is it. The thing that I like most about AutoSense is that I, as the professional, can go into every single one of those programs and I can customize them specifically for what you're looking for. This way, when you go out and live your life, you don't have to worry about constantly changing different programs. It does it automatically for you, and as long as we, the hearing care professional, has done our job correctly, each one of those programs will be set up ideally. Now, I'm gonna be honest here. I do not think that Phonak did a very good job with AutoSense OS 7.0. I've had multiple issues with misclassification of different environments. For instance, when I'm sitting in my office and my air conditioner turns on, my settings switch into a speech and car mode even though I'm still in a quiet environment. It was very off-putting to say the least, but I've had a lot of patients complain with AutoSense OS 7.0 about how their hearing aids were sounding weird in different environments, and then when we went and checked the program settings for them when they're out and about, they were in the completely wrong program for that environment. The crazy thing is I never had that issue with AutoSense OS 6.0, and so far I have not had it with AutoSense OS Ai 8.0. Okay, let's briefly talk about the different accessories that you can use with the Phonak EON and EON Sphere hearing aids. Of course, you still have the partner mic, you have the TV connector, and you have all of the great Roger accessories, the Roger On, the Roger Select, and the Roger Table mic. Of course, you even have the Roger touchscreen. I don't think there's any debate. Phonak has some of the absolute best wireless accessories out on the market, although the TV connector, you're probably not going to be using that a whole lot because now that you have Auracast, you're probably going to want to get either an Auracast transmitter for better quality audio from your TV, or you're going to buy a TV that has Auracast in it already, which negates the necessity of that particular feature. Of course, just to remind you, the performance of your accessories also has to do with how well your hearing care professional programs your EON hearing aids. Okay, so remember that trail run that I went on to test these hearing aids? Well, the day that I went out with the Phonak EON hearing aids, it happened to be a really windy day, and I noticed that the wind wasn't as bad as what I'm used to when I wear hearing aids on a trail run. Let's face it, Phonak's WindBlock version 1.0 has been around for, I don't know, as long as I've been an audiologist, and quite honestly, it didn't work that well. According to Phonak, with this new WindBlock version 2.0, they're able to reduce wind noise by up to 50 decibels, which is absurd, and up to a 30 decibel signal-to-noise ratio benefit in wind. They were actually able to accomplish this not with artificial intelligence, but with prioritizing which microphone actually picks up sound. If it's really windy out, the hearing aids actually prioritize prioritize the rear microphone, not the front microphone, which is the microphone that typically gets hit with more wind. Apparently, 96% of individuals who were tested with this particular feature preferred version 2.0 of WindBlock versus 1.0 of WindBlock, and the other 4% were either crazy or lying, apparently. Of course, despite these very impressive statistics, I just want to forewarn you, if you're driving in your car with the window down or you're out riding a bicycle with these hearing aids, you're still going to probably get some wind noise, so don't think that you're just never going to hear wind again. All right, so you guys know that I'm not a huge fan of proprietary manufacturer prescriptive algorithms. Not that I'm not a fan of them, I just can't verify them with real-ear measurement. Well, Phonak has come out with APD version 4.0. That's Adaptive Phonak Digital version 4.0. Now, Phonak has changed the way that their compression works inside of this particular algorithm. Testing showed that this particular compression strategy improved transient sounds, like someone chopping carrots on a cutting board or clinking dishes and silverware around. Phonak also reported that they had an unexpected benefit from this new APD version 4.0, which is music appreciation. Apparently, music sound quality got better with these changes as well. Now, Phonak also has APD version 4.0 contrast, that they slow down this compression speed so it's more suitable for individuals who might be older or who have more of a severe to profound level hearing loss. Something that's really exciting though is that you can see that Phonak now has the option of the NAL-NL3 prescriptive method. Now, as long as your hearing care professional is performing real ear measurement and verifying that you're hitting audibility targets with a validated prescriptive method, I don't care what prescriptive method they select inside of Phonak software. Apparently, Phonak has been working on their feedback management as well, which is good because I tend to see that Phonak hearing aids struggle with getting enough high frequency amplification. If your provider runs the feedback manager inside of the programming software, you'll notice that it defaults to having 6 decibels of overtuning. Essentially, Phonak is now confident enough with their feedback management system that they can allow you to get 6 decibels of additional gain in your feedback range without really running into feedback issues. Your hearing care professional can force this higher and overtune it a bit more, but just know that you'll be at risk for feedback. Now, keep in mind that just running this feedback management does not mean that you can always use rubber domes. If you're having too much leakage of sound that would cause feedback-related risk, then you have to switch over to a custom ear mold with an acoustically optimized vent. And I'm specifically talking about the seashell ear mold that I showed you guys earlier. This right here can allow you to get significantly better high-frequency amplification with a Phonak hearing aid without running into feedback issues. But of course, this is also the reason why it's so important to have your hearing aid programming verified with real ear measurement, because just because the software tells you that you're hitting a target doesn't mean that you actually are. You have to verify that with third-party testing, and you do that with real ear measurement. And just so you know, despite the target software having feedback management and real ear test on the same screen, that does not mean that they're running real ear measurement on you. That being said, let's take a minute to talk about real ear measurement. Real ear measurement is a form of objective verification where we place probe microphone tubes inside of your ears and measure how much amplification you're actually receiving relative to your hearing loss prescription that we plot on our computer screen. Remember how I said earlier that there's a huge difference in using a rubber dome like this one on your hearing aid versus a custom ear mold like this one on your hearing aids? Well, that's definitely true with the Phonak EON and EON Sphere hearing aids as well. Despite the improvements with the feedback manager, I still am not quite able to hit certain high frequency targets with Phonak hearing aids using open or vented domes, and I often have to go with a custom ear mold to achieve that. Also, another pro tip here, using a custom ear mold will actually get you better benefit when it comes to the artificial intelligence for noise reduction, because it restricts more of those outside noises from getting into your ear canal on their own, without the ability of the hearing aid to process them out. If you have a steeply sloping high frequency hearing loss, you can still use a Phonak hearing aid. You just have to be aware that there might be other hearing aids out there that are better at hitting high frequency targets. Now, I know I'm criticizing Phonak a lot for this, but I'm still a huge fan of Phonak hearing aids, which is why I recommend them so often. All right, so let's go back to the original question that we posed at the beginning of this review, which is, has Phonak managed to keep everything that made the Infinio Sphere hearing aid so impressive and get rid of everything that wasn't inside of the new EON Sphere hearing aid? The answer to that question is pretty much yes. The EON Sphere is significantly smaller. It has significantly better battery life. They fixed the receiver issue, thank goodness. The Spheric Speech and Loud Noise Artificial Intelligence program activates sooner than it did previously, and you can stay in that program much longer. They're better in wind. AutoSense OS Ai 8.0 is much better, and they finally have Auracast. Phonak didn't necessarily make the EON Sphere better at separating speech from background noise, but they also didn't make it any worse. What they did do is fix a lot of the issues that users had with those Infinio Sphere hearing aids, and they added some nice new features to the EONs. So who is this hearing aid actually for? Well, if you're someone who wants the maximum amount of noise reduction in a noisy environment, and you're willing to wear a custom Earmold to achieve that, and you want a hearing aid that functions really automatically as long as your hearing care professional has set it up to function that way properly, then you're probably gonna love the Phonak EON and EON Sphere hearing aids.